Have you ever felt like you were stuck in a cycle of struggles, unable to break free from the burdens weighing you down? Maybe it's fear, anxiety, or emotional pain that seems to follow you wherever you go. The truth is, many people feel trapped by invisible chains, unable to move forward. But what if there was a way to break free, to find true liberation, and to experience a life filled with peace, joy, and spiritual power? Well, Psalm 68 holds the key to that transformation. This ancient prayer is more than just words on a page. It's a divine declaration of freedom and hope. It's a prayer that speaks directly to the heart of anyone seeking deliverance from life's most difficult challenges. Whether you're struggling with emotional wounds, seeking financial breakthrough, or battling fear and insecurity, Psalm 68 offers a powerful promise. God is a deliverer who breaks chains and scatters enemies. But the question is, how do you tap into this divine power? How can you unlock the full potential of Psalm 68 to change your life? This isn't just about reading words. It's about understanding their meaning, applying them to your life, and trusting that God will act on your behalf. By the end of this, you'll discover how to use this prayer not only to break free from your struggles, but also to step into a life of spiritual abundance. Ready to experience the power of Psalm 68 and change your life forever? Let's dive in and explore how you can unlock the true freedom this prayer promises. Some people wake up every day feeling like they're carrying an invisible weight on their shoulders, burdens of worry, fear, and uncertainty. Life throws obstacles in their way, making freedom seem like a distant dream. But Psalm 68 offers something extraordinary, a divine declaration of liberation. It's not just poetry, it's a battle cry for those who feel stuck. It reminds believers that no matter how heavy their struggles may seem, there's a power greater than their problems. Think of someone locked in a dark room, searching for an exit. That's how challenges feel, like barriers with no way out. But Psalm 68 speaks of God as the one who shatters walls, bursts open doors, and leads people into the light. It's an invitation to shift focus from limitations to possibilities. If chains are holding someone back, whether emotional, spiritual, or financial, this psalm reveals that divine intervention is real. Hope is powerful because it changes perception. Imagine someone drowning in debt, convinced there's no escape. The moment they believe a breakthrough is possible, their mindset shifts. They start looking for solutions instead of surrendering. That's what Psalm 68 does. It injects hope where despair once ruled. It's a reminder that no situation is beyond redemption. Even in the darkest moments, there's always a path forward. History is filled with people who refuse to be defined by their struggles. Consider Nelson Mandela, who spent years imprisoned yet emerged to lead a nation. What sustained him? The belief that freedom was inevitable. Psalm 68 carries that same energy. It fuels resilience. It whispers to the weary, don't give up, keep going. Your chains won't last forever. It's not just about waiting for change, it's about walking toward it. There's a reason why powerful leaders, reformers, and survivors often speak of faith. When everything else crumbles, faith becomes the foundation. Psalm 68 presents faith as more than a comforting thought. It's an active force, moving mountains, breaking barriers, and opening doors. It encourages believers to stand up, not shrink back. It tells them they were made for victory, not defeat. But here's the real challenge. How does one embrace hope when surrounded by difficulties? The key lies in shifting focus. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, one must meditate on what's possible. Psalm 68 isn't about ignoring reality. It's about seeing beyond it. It's about believing in a God who turns impossibilities into testimonies. And those who embrace this mindset start noticing miracles where others see only obstacles. So if someone feels trapped, whether by fear, circumstances, or self-doubt, they need to remember this. Their story isn't over. Psalm 68 is proof that liberation isn't just a wishful thought. It's a divine promise. And speaking of divine power, what happens when God Himself steps in to break chains and scatter enemies? Well, that's where things get even more interesting. When God steps in, no chain is too strong, no prison too secure. Throughout history, we see moments where divine power shatters the impossible. Think of Paul and Silas in prison. Their chains literally fell off as they worshipped. Acts 16:25-26. Psalm 68 carries this same message. God doesn't negotiate with oppression, He demolishes it. Those who trust in Him aren't just given temporary relief, they're given real, lasting freedom. Freedom, however, doesn't always come the way people expect. Some want instant deliverance, but God often works in ways that refine and strengthen. A person struggling with anxiety may want the fear to disappear overnight, but instead, God teaches them to trust Him daily. True freedom isn't just escaping difficulty, it's becoming unshaken by it. That's what makes divine liberation so powerful. It transforms from the inside out. Imagine someone tied down by financial burdens, feeling like there's no escape. They pray, hoping for a miracle. But instead of sudden riches, God opens doors, new opportunities, wisdom, and unexpected resources. This is how He operates, not just removing obstacles, but equipping His people to overcome them. Psalm 68 reminds believers that God's power is not just about breaking chains, it's about ensuring they never get trapped again. And what about enemies? The psalm declares that God scatters them, but who are these enemies? Sometimes they're external, oppressors, injustices, or toxic situations. Other times they're internal, doubt, fear, addiction, or past trauma. Either way, God's power is the same. He doesn't just remove threats, He renders them powerless. The things that once seemed impossible to defeat suddenly lose their grip when faith takes hold. Take David, for example. He faced Goliath, an enemy that seemed undefeatable. But when he stepped forward in faith, trusting God, the giant fell. That's the essence of Psalm 68. Victory isn't about the size of the problem, but the power of the one fighting for you. Believers who grasp this truth stop fearing their circumstances and start facing them with confidence. So what does this mean in daily life? It means that no struggle, be it addiction, depression, or uncertainty, has the final word. God does. It means that no matter how strong the chains, they can and will be broken. It's a shift in mindset from victim to victor. Those who hold on to this truth begin to walk differently, talk differently, and expect breakthroughs rather than breakdowns. But freedom is just the beginning. Once God breaks the chains, what comes next? Psalm 68 doesn't just talk about liberation, it reveals something deeper, God's divine strategy to remove invisible barriers like fear, anxiety, and insecurity. And that changes everything. Some see the Psalms as beautiful poetry, comforting words for difficult times. But Psalm 68 is more than that. It's a decree, a divine proclamation that carries power. When spoken in faith, it doesn't just inspire, it activates spiritual breakthroughs. This is why declaring God's word out loud is so powerful. It shifts the atmosphere. It's not about wishful thinking, it's about aligning with a decree that already carries divine authority. Consider how fear operates. It's an invisible chain, yet it dictates decisions, limits dreams, and keeps people from stepping into their purpose. Anxiety whispers lies that paralyze. Insecurity convinces people they're not enough. But Psalm 68 is a direct response to these internal enemies. It reminds believers that they serve a God who breaks not only physical chains but also mental and emotional ones. It's about true, holistic freedom. Think about a person afraid to pursue their calling because of self-doubt. They hesitate, overthink, and never take action. But what if, instead of listening to fear, they started declaring Psalm 68 daily? Imagine them saying, "Let God arise, let His enemies be scattered," Psalm 68:1, every morning. Words create reality. As they speak divine truth, their mindset shifts, fear loses its grip, and confidence takes root. This isn't just theory, it's a spiritual law. Even in the Bible, God's spoken word brought creation into existence. Jesus Himself used Scripture to combat the enemy in the wilderness. Matthew 4:4. The same principle applies today. When believers speak Psalm 68 over their lives, they're not reciting poetry, they're unleashing a divine command that pushes back darkness and opens doors to freedom. But let's get practical. How can someone use this psalm in daily life? One way is through intentional prayer, turning its words into personal declarations. Instead of passively reading it, they can say, "God, you scatter my fears, you break my chains, you lead me to victory." Writing these declarations and placing them in visible areas, mirrors, car dashboards, phone wallpapers, keeps the truth in front of them. Repetition builds faith. Many battle invisible barriers that others can't see. A person may appear strong on the outside, but wrestle with crippling insecurity inside. Another may be surrounded by people, yet feel alone. Psalm 68 speaks into these hidden struggles. It's a reminder that God sees the unseen, fights battles no one else notices, and brings deliverance that goes beyond the surface. His freedom touches the deepest parts of the soul. But what happens after these barriers are broken? What's the next step? Psalm 68 reveals something even greater. How praise and worship aren't just responses to victory, but keys that shift reality and invite divine transformation. There's something powerful about worship. It shifts focus from the problem to the solution. Too often people get consumed by their struggles, analyzing every detail, replaying worst-case scenarios. But when they choose to worship, they break that cycle. Psalm 68 is a call to lift God above every situation, to declare that no obstacle is greater than Him. It's not about ignoring difficulties, it's about seeing them in the right perspective. Take Paul and Silas in prison. They had every reason to feel hopeless. Instead, they worshiped. They didn't wait for their situation to change before praising. They praised, and then their situation changed. Acts 16:25-26. That's the power of worship. It's not just singing, it's warfare. It invites God's presence into the very places that seem impossible to escape from, breaking chains in the process. Science even backs this up. Studies show that gratitude and positive declarations physically rewire the brain. Worship does something similar. It trains the mind to focus on God's greatness rather than the weight of the problem. A person battling stress may feel overwhelmed, but if they start their day by worshiping, even when they don't feel like it, something shifts. Anxiety loses its grip and peace takes over. Worship also changes the spiritual atmosphere. Have you ever walked into a place that felt heavy, almost oppressive? That's because environments carry energy. The Bible says God inhabits the praises of His people. Psalm 22:3. So when someone fills their home, car, or mind with worship, they're inviting God to take over that space. Darkness can't stay where there's light. The environment shifts and peace reigns. Think about King Jehoshaphat. When he faced an overwhelming enemy, he didn't send soldiers first, he sent worshipers. 2 Chronicles 20:21-22. It made no logical sense, but the result? The enemy turned on itself, and Israel won the battle without fighting. Worship isn't just a response to victory, it's often the key to unlocking it. Praise doesn't just celebrate what God has done, it activates what He's about to do. So, how can someone incorporate worship into their daily routine? It's more than just Sunday mornings. Playing worship music while driving, speaking praises out loud, even taking a few moments to thank God before a stressful meeting. These small habits transform not only the individual, but also everything around them. Worship becomes a lifestyle, not just an event. But here's the deeper question. Why does God use worship to bring freedom? Because He is not just a liberator. He's an expert in breaking every kind of chain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. Psalm 68 doesn't just talk about freedom. It reveals that God is the one who opens locked doors and leads His people into new beginnings. Some people see God as distant, as if He only intervenes in extreme cases. But Psalm 68 paints a different picture. God is not just willing to set people free. He is an expert in liberation. He knows exactly where the chains are, whether they're visible or hidden deep within the soul. Fear, trauma, addiction, doubt. No chain is too strong for Him. When God moves, no prison stays locked. Think about Peter in Acts 12. He was locked in a cell, chained between soldiers, with no human way out. But in the middle of the night, an angel appeared. The chains fell off and the prison doors opened on their own. Acts 12:7-10. That wasn't luck, it was divine intervention. This is what God does. He sees the impossible and makes a way where there is none. He doesn't just break chains, He leads people into total freedom. But not all chains are physical. Some are mental, negative thoughts that keep a person in cycles of fear and self-doubt. Others are emotional, past wounds that still dictate present actions. And some are spiritual, strongholds that block someone from experiencing true peace. God works in all these areas. He doesn't just open a door and leave, He walks with His people, ensuring they never return to bondage. Consider someone battling a destructive habit like addiction or toxic relationships. They try to break free but keep falling back. The problem isn't just the habit. It's the mindset, the unseen chains keeping them stuck. That's why true liberation requires more than willpower. It requires divine power. Psalm 68 declares that God leads out the prisoners with singing. Psalm 68:6, meaning his freedom brings joy, not just escape. This also applies to people feeling trapped in life, stuck in a job they hate, surrounded by negativity, or burdened by stress. God doesn't just want his people to survive, he wants them to live in abundance. But stepping into that requires trust. Sometimes God opens a door, but fear keeps people from walking through it. True freedom isn't just about removing barriers, it's about stepping into something better. So, how does someone invite God's freedom into their life? First, by surrender, acknowledging they need him to break the chains they can't. Second, by aligning with his word, declaring scriptures like Psalm 68 over their life. And third, by taking action, choosing to walk in faith, even when emotions say otherwise. Liberation isn't just a one-time event, it's a journey of transformation. And that journey doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes God's timing is different from human expectations. But that doesn't mean he's not working. Even when results aren't immediate, he is still leading the way, proving that true freedom isn't just about the destination, it's about trusting him in the process. One of the hardest lessons in life is waiting, especially when the soul longs for freedom. Psalm 68 makes it clear that God is a liberator, but he works on his own timeline. People often expect immediate change, but God's process is different. Sometimes he removes the chains instantly. Other times he allows the journey to unfold step by step. The key is trust. Just because the breakthrough isn't visible doesn't mean it's not happening. Think about the Israelites in Egypt. After centuries of slavery, God promised deliverance. But instead of immediate release, there was a process. Plagues, negotiations with Pharaoh, even moments where things seemed to get worse before getting better. Why? Because God wasn't just freeing their bodies, he was transforming their minds, preparing them for a new life. True liberation is more than escape, it's stepping into a new identity. Many people today experience this same process. Someone prays for healing, but the symptoms persist. Another asks for a new opportunity but faces rejection after rejection. It's easy to wonder if God is listening, but in moments of delay, faith is tested and strengthened. The story of Joseph proves this. Sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned, forgotten. Yet at the right time, God lifted him from the pit to the palace. The wait wasn't wasted, it was preparation. There's also a practical reason why some breakthroughs take time. Imagine a person trapped in financial debt. If they were given a sudden fortune without learning financial wisdom, they might fall back into the same trap. God, in his wisdom, often works on the internal before changing the external. Psalm 68 shows this pattern. God doesn't just rescue, he equips, teaches, and builds character along the way. Patience in this process is crucial. Many give up right before the breakthrough because they don't see results. But a seed doesn't sprout the moment it's planted. It grows underground before breaking through the surface. Spiritual growth works the same way. Just because there's no visible change yet, doesn't mean transformation isn't happening. Faith isn't about seeing, it's about trusting. So how does someone stay strong during the waiting period? By anchoring themselves in God's promises. Reading the Bible daily, praying even when answers seem delayed, and surrounding themselves with faith-filled people. Worship is another key. Praising God before the breakthrough comes. These actions don't just make the wait bearable, they make it powerful. And when the right time comes, the breakthrough happens suddenly. Chains that seemed unbreakable fall in an instant. Doors that were closed for years swing wide open. The wait may have been long, but the reward is worth it. And when that moment comes, the journey won't just be about escaping struggles. It will be about seeing how God was leading all along. Life often feels like a desert, a place of uncertainty, dryness, and waiting. In Psalm 68, God is portrayed as the one who leads his people through these challenging seasons, just as he guided the Israelites through the wilderness. The journey wasn't comfortable, and it wasn't quick, but God never abandoned them. He provided manna, water from a rock, and a pillar of fire to light the way. Even when they doubted, he remained faithful. That same promise stands today. God is still leading, even when the path isn't clear. Think about it. How many times do people feel lost, unsure of their next step? Maybe it's a job situation, a broken relationship, or a season of spiritual dryness. In these moments, it's easy to believe that God is distant. But just because he isn't speaking in the way one expects, doesn't mean he's absent. The Israelites didn't always see what God was doing behind the scenes, but he was always working, parting seas, making ways where there seemed to be none. One of the most powerful truths about God's guidance is that he doesn't just lead people out of something, he leads them into something better. The Israelites weren't just escaping Egypt, they were heading toward the Promised Land. But they had to go through the wilderness first. Why? Because God was shaping them, refining them, and teaching them dependence on him. Liberation isn't just about breaking chains, it's about preparing for the next season. This applies to spiritual battles as well. Some people feel stuck in cycles of fear, doubt, or sin. They pray for deliverance, but the struggle continues. Why? Because sometimes God allows the process to strengthen faith. The desert isn't a punishment, it's a training ground. David was anointed king long before he sat on the throne. Joseph had dreams of greatness, but had to endure betrayal and imprisonment first. God didn't forget them. He was preparing them. So how does someone trust God's guidance when there's no visible progress? By looking at his track record. The Bible is filled with stories of people who thought they were forgotten, only to realize God was leading them all along. Elijah thought he was alone, but God had thousands of faithful believers waiting. Paul was imprisoned, but his letters written in confinement still impact the world today. The desert doesn't mean abandonment. It means transformation. Faith in God's guidance isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing who holds them. It's about waking up each day and choosing to trust that even if the road is unclear, the destination is certain. It's about believing that even when nothing seems to be happening, God is moving in ways beyond human understanding. The desert may last for a season, but it won't last forever. And when the time comes, the breakthrough will make sense. The struggles will no longer be seen as obstacles, but as essential steps towards something greater. Looking back, it will become clear. God was leading, guiding, and working all along. But what happens when freedom finally arrives? That's where the real transformation begins. When you're in the midst of a struggle, it's hard to see the big picture. The weight of the chains feels overwhelming, and the road ahead seems impossibly long. Yet, as Psalm 68 assures us, liberation is not just about the end result, it's about what happens during the journey. Each step, each challenge faced, and each moment of doubt brings an opportunity for spiritual growth. The process itself strengthens the soul. Consider the story of Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his health, and his family. Yet, in the end, he declared, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. The process of suffering, the waiting, and the uncertainty led him to a deeper understanding of God. The journey wasn't easy, but it was essential for his spiritual transformation. That's often how liberation works. It's not just about being freed, it's about becoming who you're meant to be. The same principle applies to anyone going through a difficult season. There's no way to skip the hard parts, the desert, the trials, the waiting. But those moments serve a purpose. They build endurance, perseverance, and character. Romans 5:3-4 tells us that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. The very things that seem to hold you back are actually pushing you forward, shaping you into someone stronger, more resilient. Think about a seed. It has to break open in order to grow into a plant. Without that process of being buried, it would never sprout. Similarly, people often grow the most in their hardest seasons. The struggles, though painful, force them to rely on something greater than themselves. They learn to pray, to trust, to lean on God's strength. Without those moments of breaking, they would never experience the fullness of liberation. As you go through life, you might look back at your own difficult seasons and realize they were pivotal in your growth. Perhaps there was a time when you felt spiritually dry, emotionally exhausted, or physically drained. But as time passed, you saw how those struggles shaped your character, deepened your faith, and made you more empathetic. What felt like a burden at the time becomes a testimony of victory. This principle of growth through difficulty also teaches us about the importance of perspective. The same challenge can look entirely different depending on where you stand. From the perspective of someone in the middle of a trial, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. But looking back, the obstacles begin to make sense. You realize that what seemed like a setback was actually a stepping stone toward a deeper level of freedom and understanding. When you see the full scope of God's work in your life, you can look at past struggles with gratitude. They weren't pointless, they were purposeful. And as you move forward, you can embrace the new challenges with greater confidence, knowing that God uses every part of the journey to shape you into who you're meant to become. But what's next after transformation? That's where the power of your newfound strength comes into play. You've just discovered the transformative power of Psalm 68, a prayer that holds the key to breaking chains and unlocking the freedom God promises. But the real question is, what will you do with this knowledge? How will you apply it to your life and watch your struggles fade into the background as God works on your behalf? Will you embrace His guidance, trust in His timing, and believe that your liberation is already on its way? The journey to freedom is not always easy, but as we've learned, it's always worth it. With God leading you, no challenge is too great and no enemy too powerful. The chains that once held you back can be broken, and the path to your breakthrough can be clearer than ever. But the first step is yours. Pray with faith, speak the words of Psalm 68, and trust that God will deliver. What areas of your life do you need to surrender to God for His divine intervention? How can you start today, right now, to declare your freedom? Take a moment to reflect and apply what you've learned. And if you're ready for more powerful insights on how to transform your life through God's Word, don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. Stay connected, because your journey to true freedom is just beginning.